What if the greatest joy in life wasn't found in what you keep, but in what you give away? Follow the journey of a tree that gives without asking, and discover a lesson that could change your life forever. The sun had begun its slow descent over the hills, casting a golden glow across the sprawling landscape. Beneath the great tree, the tree of generosity, Jesus sat surrounded by his disciples. The tree's massive trunk was thick with age, its bark rough and weathered, yet the branches above were a living testament to the power of nature's grace, heavy with the fruits that had drawn so many to this sacred place. Each disciple had their own thoughts, but none spoke. The air was thick with quiet reverence, and the soft whispers of the tree's leaves stirred in the cool breeze. Jesus looked at each of his disciples, Peter, John, Thomas, and the others, and saw the burdens they carried, the questions in their hearts, the uncertainty in their eyes. He knew that today something profound would take root in their souls. He could feel the weight of the moment. "Come, sit with me," he said softly, motioning to the ground around him. His voice carried the warmth of a long-loved friend, inviting everyone to listen, to open their hearts. As the disciples gathered, Jesus spoke in a calm yet commanding voice, the kind that stirred something deep inside the soul. "There is a story I must share with you," he began, his gaze turning toward the mighty tree. "A story of generosity, of giving without expectation, and of the joy that follows." Jesus leaned back against the tree, the coolness of its trunk pressing into his back, and began his tale. Many years ago, in a distant village, there stood a small, unassuming tree. It was not the tallest in the forest, nor the most extravagant, but it had something very special about it. His voice grew soft, as if recalling an ancient memory. People who passed by the tree often stopped to admire its beauty, but what truly made it remarkable were the fruits it bore. These fruits had the power to heal the sick, to comfort the weary, and to bring joy to those who were in despair. Anyone who sought refuge under its shade would leave with their spirits lifted, their hearts filled with peace. The disciples listened intently, captivated by the story. Thomas, always skeptical, shifted uneasily. He was the first to speak, his voice tinged with doubt. "Master," Thomas asked, "how can a tree give so much? Why does it give and ask for nothing in return?" Jesus smiled gently, his eyes reflecting both the mystery and beauty of the question. Because the tree knew that its purpose was to give. It did not ask for recognition or fame. It simply gave, and in giving, it became part of something greater than itself. As Jesus continued, the story grew more vivid. The travelers, the sick, the hungry, all came to the tree seeking its healing fruit. One day, a man arrived, gaunt from hunger and wearied by a long journey. His clothes were tattered, his eyes dull with exhaustion. He reached the tree and paused, sensing something different about it. The tree, as if welcoming him, seemed to bend slightly, offering a branch laden with ripe fruit. The traveler's hands shook as he picked one, its skin golden and smooth. He took a bite, and instantly the weariness seemed to melt away. A warmth spread through him, starting at his chest and radiating outward. His aches vanished, and for the first time in many weeks he felt peace. He sat under the tree's shade, his heart racing not from fear, but from an overwhelming sense of relief. The traveler looked up at the tree and whispered, "Why do you give so freely?" "I have nothing to offer in return." The air grew still. The traveler's question seemed to hang in the air, unanswered. He sat quietly, staring at the tree, feeling a sense of comfort like he had never known before. Though the tree did not speak in words, something about it stirred within him, as if the tree was imparting its wisdom. He closed his eyes and listened, not with his ears but with his heart. And then, as if the tree had sent a quiet message to his soul, he understood. The tree gives not for reward or recognition, but because it knows that its purpose is to nourish life, to spread hope, to share its bounty with those who need it. A tear rolled down the traveler's cheek. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly seen, truly cared for. He murmured a prayer of thanks, promising to honor the tree's spirit in his own life. Jesus paused in his storytelling, his eyes turning to meet each disciple's gaze. He could see the thoughts in their minds, some confused, some inspired, others skeptical. "This is the lesson, my disciples," Jesus said. "The tree's gift is not just in its fruit. It is in its spirit, its willingness to give, and its understanding that by giving, it is part of the great cycle of life. You too must learn this. When you give from your heart, when you do not seek anything in return, you will find that your joy and your peace will overflow in ways you cannot imagine." Peter, always eager, leaned forward. "But Master, it is hard. We are human. We crave recognition even if we do not admit it. We want to feel valued. How can we give without expecting something in return?" Jesus smiled warmly. "It is not easy, Peter, but it is the way of the heart. When you give freely without looking for reward, you will discover that the joy of seeing others blessed will fill you with more peace than any recognition or praise could. Remember, the tree gives without seeing the fruits of its generosity, but its branches are heavy with life." That night, as they gathered around the campfire, Thomas lingered at the edge of the group, his brow furrowed in thought. He had always questioned, always doubted. And while Jesus' words made sense, they did not completely ease the discomfort in his heart. As the fire flickered, casting shadows over his face, he approached Jesus. "Master," Thomas began hesitantly, "I understand the tree gives freely, but how do we know it won't be taken advantage of? How do we protect ourselves from giving too much?" Jesus looked at Thomas with gentle understanding. "Thomas, the tree does not worry about taking care of itself. It trusts in the natural flow of life. In the same way, you must learn to trust that your generosity will always return to you in unexpected ways. The fear of being taken advantage of will keep your heart closed. When you give freely, you open yourself to the beauty of the world, and you find that it nourishes you in ways you cannot predict." Days passed, and the disciples began to understand the truth of Jesus' words, though not without difficulty. Peter, ever the eager one, began helping strangers along the road, giving away his food and water. Yet, as he did, he found himself growing anxious. Was he giving too much? Would there be enough for him? John, on the other hand, opened his heart fully, embracing the spirit of generosity, and soon found his burdens lightened as his acts of kindness were returned by strangers he had helped. His heart swelled with joy. Meanwhile, Thomas struggled to let go of his fears. But each time he looked at the tree, he remembered its silent wisdom. He began to share a little more, slowly, hesitantly, until one day, a stranger stopped him on the road and offered him a gift in return. It was a small token, but it filled Thomas's heart with a warmth he could not describe. One afternoon, as the disciples traveled, they came upon a sickly woman, her face pale and her body frail. She had heard of the tree's miraculous fruits and had come seeking its healing power. But the tree stood miles away and the woman could barely walk. Without thinking, Peter reached out, offering the last of his water. John offered some of his food. Thomas, his heart now more open than it had been, took her hand and helped her walk toward the tree. As they reached it, the woman, exhausted but hopeful, rested beneath its branches. After a while, she ate the fruit offered to her, and her color began to return. She looked up at them, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You have saved me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you." In that moment, the disciples understood the true power of giving. It was not about what was received in return. It was about the joy in seeing someone else's burden lifted. Back beneath the tree, Jesus looked at his disciples with love. "You see," he said softly, "the greatest gift you can offer is the gift of love, without expecting anything in return. In doing so, you become like this tree, rooted in the eternal cycle of giving, receiving, and renewing." As the days turned into weeks, the disciples carried the wisdom of the tree with them, sharing what they had learned. And each time they gave freely without reservation, they felt their hearts fill with something more precious than gold: peace. Years passed and the tree still stood, its branches heavy with fruit, its roots deep in the earth. And those who passed by, whether rich or poor, young or old, found that it always had something to give. And as for the disciples, they too had become like the tree, living lives of generosity, love and joy, always giving, always receiving. This is end of the story. Comment amen if you believe in Jesus' blessings. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.